One of the most interesting things, I think, about the roles within a narcissistic family, especially the roles that the kids play, which is typically either the golden child or the scapegoat, is that they're not fixed, meaning they can change over time, depending on your behavior and how you're serving your narcissistic parent. And for the majority of my time living with my parents, I thought that I fulfilled more of the golden child role. And the reason for that is because when I started researching, signs of golden child syndrome in adult children of narcissistic parents, I was met with things like perfectionism, studiousness, competitiveness, a need to achieve, fear of failure, all of these characteristics that really resonated with me that I was able to kind of trace back to a lot of different experiences in my life. And the only difference really was that in the eyes of a narcissistic parent, the golden child can do no wrong. And there were absolutely times when I felt like that, where I felt like I was favored by my narcissistic parent, but that didn't necessarily mean that I could do no wrong. I was favored by my parent and I was treated like the golden child when I was in good standing with them. Meaning anytime I was saying or doing exactly what it was that they wanted me to say or do. If I ever didn't feel like defending them in an argument, if I was feeling really stressed or frustrated or drained and I just didn't want to get in the middle, I was no longer receiving what I have come to call golden child treatment. I don't think that was necessarily my role at all. But I did receive some similar treatment that a golden child would experience from a narcissistic parent, again, when I was in good standing. And I think I experienced that so consistently, mainly out of fear, because when you are raised by a narcissistic parent, you very quickly learn to pick up on behavior. I think that's a lot of the hypervigilance that so many of us experience, where we develop this skill, really. It is a skill, I think, at the end of the day, to pick up on very minor changes in tone or body language or even cadence, the way that our parent is speaking. Sometimes even I know people have mentioned the way that they're walking. You hear the footsteps in the house, and just based on that alone, you know what's happening or what's about to happen. And so we pick up on these things and we cater our behavior to what we think will be best perceived by our narcissistic parent, because nothing is less pleasurable or enjoyable than experiencing narcissistic rage or having a narcissistic parent be triggered, because they sort of act out their emotions. And so if they're feeling stressed or angry, the entire environment is going to be stressed and angry, and everyone is going to kind of focus their efforts on how to make that person feel better. And so if you know that you can say or do certain things to prevent that from happening, or at least to make it less likely, then of course you're going to do it. Especially if you're a kid and you haven't ever really been exposed to any other healthy relationship dynamics, within a family. You just that's your normal. And I feel like that's the case for a lot of us. It's a little bit different when you're talking about maybe an adult romantic relationship with someone who has experienced other healthy interpersonal relationships. They have a little bit more perspective, and perspective is so important when you're dealing with any kind of emotional abuse, especially a relationship with a narcissist, because they're incredibly charismatic. They have such a wide range of emotions that they're able to tap into at any given time to manipulate people into doing whatever it is that they want them to do. But when you're dealing with a kid, if that's the environment that you've existed in for your entire life, it's a lot harder to recognize these red flags, that, to know that there's any kind of manipulation actually happening. And so a lot of these behaviors and these tendencies, no matter how unhealthy they are, sort of seamlessly make their way into your life. And you sort of start to do these things just by default. But if a situation does come up where you make a decision or you express an opinion that feels much truer to you than whatever it is that maybe your narcissistic parent wants or expects of you, then all of a sudden, the treatment that you're receiving completely changes. And that was the case for me. I remember feeling like, okay, maybe being an adult means that what's right for me doesn't always necessarily align with what my parent believes to be right or what's right for my parent. I remember having that realization, but really struggling sometimes to put that into practice, just because I always felt so pressured to live up to the expectations, I guess, that were placed upon me by my narcissistic parent, which, looking back, were just complacency, just listening to what they wanted and kind of falling in line and doing as they thought I should do. But when I actually started to take those steps to start doing the things that felt truer to me and not my parent, that was when that golden child treatment completely stopped. And that was when a lot of their more toxic behavior not only intensified, but also became a lot more apparent to me. And I started to realize that maybe I had been the scapegoat all along. And it was eye-opening for me, because I had always believed that, I was in really good standing with my parent, and that all of the personal sacrifices that I had made for our relationship, for our family, I always thought that those meant something to my parent, that it was kind of a reflection of, the amount of time and energy that I'm willing to dedicate to the people in my life that I consider to be closest to me. And yet none of that mattered. It was like I was a complete stranger. I was a completely different person, and I was being treated worse than I had ever been treated, all because I was drawing a line and making a decision that I knew was right for me, that my narcissistic parent did not like. And so from that point on, all of my family's issues were blamed on me. They were somehow my fault, even though in the past, these same issues were attributed to another sibling or another family member, whoever was in my parents' crosshairs at the time. But again, before I did any of this research and I learned anything about narcissism or the roles within a narcissistic family, I was completely naive to all of this toxicity and manipulation. And so I took a lot of it very personally, which is partially why I feel so inspired to talk about this, to talk about my experience openly, because being made to feel like you are the worst person in the world, like all of your family's issues after decades maybe of dedication are your fault, there are few feelings worse than that, especially if you don't know that all of these things are just being projected onto you, that it's not really your fault, that you're not really a terrible person, but by gaining independence and maybe starting to stand on your own 2 feet, in the eyes of a narcissistic parent, you're doing the worst thing possible. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, be sure to give it a like and subscribe to my channel. I am not a professional. I don't claim to be one, but a therapist once told me that I am an expert in my own experience. And I want to speak about these topics candidly so that anyone who has experienced or is currently experiencing something like it knows a little bit more about what to expect, how to respond, and that you're not alone.